Good afternoon. My name is Harry Oberg. I'm the Mayor of Prescott, Arizona. I'm here today with Pete Gordon from the U.S. Forest Service, Prescott Fire Center, located at Prescott Airport. This is kind of tucked away here, and I think a lot of people don't even realize it's here and the capabilities you have. So one thing that happens starting at the end of April, May timeframe, I have a lot of local residents coming up to me and saying they're kind of worried about the fire season, and they're hearing things about maybe some restrictions, closures, or even some fires that have occurred recently. And I know we've had some recently. And so they start sending me emails, writing me letters, catching me on the street and saying, oh, what do we got here to take care of forest fires if we get one started? Because I'm worried that if, with the winds being from the southwest, in the, May, June, July timeframe, that, boy, if there's something that starts on the Prescott forest, that they could very well come into town and take my house. So I know you have a tremendous amount of capabilities here, everything from the towers that you have out there, the equipment that you have dispersed around the local area and maybe even the county, and of course this fabulous facility here and all your capabilities. So maybe you could just take a couple minutes and just tell us what your capabilities are, starting with the fire towers.
Sure. So the Prescott National Forest, we have 4 lookout towers. That's our primary source of detection, but we also rely heavily on the public to help us with detection. We get several calls sometimes when there's smoke in the area. And then certain times of the year, especially when we get lightning, we'll use aerial detection. We have aircraft that are stationed here, or we can bring them in, and they'll do a lot of the aerial detection for us. So we have 3 components really to aerial detection. If you're interested about the other resources we have across the forest, we have 5 fire engines that are assigned to or belong to the Prescott National Forest. We also host a Type 3 helicopter with a helitack crew. That's a crew equipped to fight fire as well as manage a helicopter, whether it's tactical or logistics missions. We also have on forest the Prescott Hotshot crew. They're a national resource, and so if they happen to be here and available, we use them, and that is often the case. But as a national resource, they'll often be on a fire. As today we were talking off camera earlier, our Prescott Hotshots happen to be on a fire near Globe, Arizona right now. So in addition to our resources, we can tap into a large network of mobilized resources across the country. Many of those national resources are other hotshot crews, and as you met earlier today, we have a hotshot crew stationed here from Nevada, filling in right behind our hotshot crew, and similar to them, there's 3 or 4 other crews across the region filling in. We also have a fuels crew. Their primary job is to do fuels mitigation work throughout the summer and into the fall, but those crew members and their leadership are highly capable crews, what we call a Type 2 IA crew. Mm-hmm. They're an available resource to us. We also have prevention technicians, specialists that deal in the education and information side of the house, as well as being firefighters, and they help us quite a bit with our compliance and enforcement should we go into restrictions. And then later today we'll do a tour, and you can see all the resources we have housed here that support all of those folks I just mentioned.
Okay, and as I understand it, this is open year-round.
Yes.
But then you really start to plus up for the fire season. Can you tell me when you start putting people in the towers, when you start bringing in the Prescott Hotshots, the 20-person crew to start being available for fires?
Yes, that is typically mid-April for us, and really has been for the last decade or so. That may vary a week or two, but by mid-April every year we've got all those folks on board. We will go through a good couple of weeks of critical training, whether it's the fire engines, our prevention folks, or the hotshots, helitack crew. All of our resources go through a pretty critical, important piece of training for the first week or two, but available. And by the end of April, we're statused on the board. Hotshot crews are available nationally, helicopter crews available. So typically by mid-April, and that was the case this year. Our lookout towers are up by the middle of the month, and so were all of our firefighters.
So the people that you have here to fight fires, they're professionals. I mean, they train all the time. If they're not here, they're probably someplace else. Yep. Standing by to fight fires.
Yep, great observation. That's absolutely true. We spend a great deal of time in our winter and our springtime with formal training. But the other wonderful thing about this career and our professional firefighters is all the on-the-job training. There's a tremendous amount of informal training that goes on with just the experience of being available. And as you mentioned, if they're not here, they're somewhere else helping out. It's again part of this national mobilization network that we are a part of. It involves state, local resources as well as all the federal agencies. And if we're in a position to allow our resources to be available, we'll have engines from Montana to southern Arizona. Even earlier this year, we had some fire engines and personnel as far away as Georgia and Florida.
I think you've got a pretty large area here. I think there's several fire districts in the state. Can you talk about yours, how big that is, and
Sure.
what it covers?
Yeah, so the Prescott National Forest, if you can make this out on the map, there's obviously lots of shades of green, but this stretch here is our western side, made up of a couple districts I'll mention in a minute.
And Prescott is?
Prescott sits right here.
Okay.
Here's the community of Prescott. Highway 69, Highway 89A towards Mingus Mountain, and Highway 89 towards Chino, if that helps get bearings. This is the other half of our forest that abuts the Verde River and the Coconino National Forest. We also abut the Tonto National Forest and some BLM land down here. And out here to our west is a lot of state and private land, as well as BLM. We are not the largest forest in the region. We're just shy of about 1 million acres, but we have a lot of country spread out, as you can see. It's several miles from north to south and from east to west. The Prescott National Forest is made up of 3 districts, and that is the Verde Ranger District, the Chino Valley Ranger District, which is actually the north half on both sides, and then the Bradshaw District, which really has the southwest portion. The way we operate as far as fire management and fire response, we've broken the forest simply up into 2 zones, an east and a west. It just makes it more streamlined, more efficient for us to manage on that, as you can see by the layout of the map being separated by the Chino Valley and the Agua Fria drainage down here. So that's how we're dispersed.
And you also work with other agencies, BLM,
Yes.
State Forestry, even our local fire department.
Absolutely, and I'm glad you brought that up. I wanted to mention that when you asked about the resources available to fight fire, I would be remiss if I didn't give credit where credit's due, that if our citizens in Prescott are worried about fires coming into the forest, or as often the case, we have fires that come from private land onto the forest, there is a deep and rich history right here in the Prescott Basin of local cooperators, state cooperators, and federal cooperators coming together. We do this annual basin drill. I know you've come out to see that. And when the real thing happens, we have radio interoperability. We train together, and our folks will show up. It doesn't matter the color of the fire truck. They all show up. And so we partner quite well with all levels of the fire response community, including the local fire departments. We're big partners with the Phoenix BLM district, which you can see surrounds us on the map here, and then Arizona State Land, the local district here. There is a lot of interplay, as you can see by the various colors on the map. It is very common that if we have a fire on the forest, it's probably close to either private property, another federal entity, or maybe the state. And also, the inverse is also true. The state may have a fire, or we might have a fire in one of the fire districts. And because of the way this is laid out, the forest is right there next door, and oftentimes there's a threat to the forest land. So it makes sense and it's efficient that we respond together.
Yeah, and I think each one of these agencies, the U.S. Forest Service, BLM, the state, they have their own firefighting capability.
They do. Yes.
So if it's on their land, they'll probably be the ones that
Yes.
initially start to look at whether they can handle the fire, and if they can't, then they start calling either you or the state or something to come in and assist. Is that correct?
Yep, that's accurate. But there's often the case, as you might guess, especially in what we call the urban interface, there's a lot of automatic response, or I would say very short deliberation. Generally, what you say is true, that especially in our outlying areas, the primary agency of jurisdiction will make that call if they need a support from another agency. But a lot of the interface around Prescott, along the edge of the forest on the highway corridors, it's fairly automatic that you'll see a multi-agency response.
And I think that occurred yesterday. Could you explain that?
It did. So yesterday, well within the city of Prescott, near downtown off of Montezuma, there was a fire in the grass. And from what I understand, the battalion chief immediately saw the volume of smoke and the size of the fire. In addition to the Prescott Fire Department resources responding, the battalion chief immediately asked for the availability and then the request for Forest Service resources. So we ended up sending one of our fire engines, our fuels crew that I mentioned earlier, and then the hotshot crew that's here from Nevada. We sent them out there to help.
And I think you keep some of your apparatus actually co-located with our fire station.
We do. Another wonderful, I guess, attribute or a benefit of the relationships I was bragging about. So not only do we work together, and we've known each other for years and generations before some of us, we're proud of the fact that we're co-located not only with Prescott Fire Department there at Station 71, but also Station 54 with Central Arizona Fire and Medical Authority. We've got a fire engine station there out in the Dewey area. So very proud of that.
So explain very quickly what you see the conditions are right now after we've had a very wet winter and a wet spring.
So I guess generally speaking, let me start kind of at the high 30,000 foot level. This summer compared to summers of the past, probably a shorter duration fire season was predictable. And we certainly probably have wetter conditions, especially the northern part of the state above the rim. We had excellent snowpack above the rim and north of us. In the Prescott area and the central highlands of Yavapai County, we had significant rain as well, carrying us all the way into March. That did good by the environment to introduce moisture in the soil, which in turn puts moisture in the vegetation. The drawback to all that precipitation, which we've all been talking about, is the grass growth. So with that said, while we might have a shorter duration fire season and probably less impacts at higher elevation because of snow and moisture, we are seeing, and we could see between now and monsoon season, a pretty tremendous impact in our mid to lower elevation where grass is the primary vegetation. The grass is tall and the grass is starting to cure out as we get into June. To bring it down to this date, today, this point in time, with the rains we just had a couple weeks ago, that certainly took a bite out of trending towards being really dry, but it hasn't taken long and it won't take long. We're expecting a little bit of wind. The temperatures are coming up over the holiday weekend. So we expect by this time here, a week from now, a lot drier than, it sort of logarithmically, it's going to start escalating to the point where we might even be considering going into restrictions by the end of next week.
Okay. And how does the monsoon affect your firefighting efforts?
Well, a couple of ways. Number one, once it's established, it brings usually a significant precipitation. And when that happens, we see not only moisture again reintroduced to the fuels, both the live fuels and the dead fuels, and into the soil, therefore impeding fire behavior. That's a good thing, but it also brings grass growth to some of our perennial grasses, which will then feed fuel maybe for the next fire season. So the rain is sort of a good and bad thing. The other thing that monsoon season does, obviously, is bring the lightning. There's a transition period when we are coming out of our peak fire season and into the monsoon, where to say generically, maybe we run pins and needles a little bit. If it's been tremendously dry, it's not uncommon that the monsoons will come in with lightning first without precipitation. Sometimes it takes a few weeks to build enough moisture and the pattern and the high to set up appropriately to bring a lot of moisture. When that happens, of course, we can see some fires that could exhibit some extreme or heavy fire behavior. But ordinarily, once we see the established rain, it takes a little while to get widespread across the forest. We will get lightning fires, and most of those, the fire behavior has moderated to the point where it's really doing ecological good. It's cleaning the forest floor, it's reintroducing nitrogen into the soils, and it's doing a bit of restoration work on its own, as nature used to.
Well, speaking of lightning, I believe I was talking to one of your people up in the tower, and it gets pretty interesting during lightning season because they're in a metal building,
yeah,
on the metal stilts, and I guess they can. It's not dangerous, but maybe you kind of explain what they have to do to protect themselves.
Sure. Well, first of all, as I would hope folks understand, those buildings are grounded. They have the electrical conductor into the ground, well staked on purpose. But even you'll notice in some of our towers, some of the chairs that they sit in and the table on which we put what's called the Osborne Firefinder. That's the device they actually line things up on. Sometimes they'll even have those on old glass insulators from the old telephone poles and power lines. So everything's insulated, but it's not uncommon. If there's a heavy storm, our lookout towers are the first to report it as it's tracking towards them. And they'll often just notify dispatch over the radio that they're going to go down for lightning. And they'll literally take themselves out of the building, either go to their vehicle, or if it's one of our towers that has a building, they'll get out of the metal tower and into the building and wait for the storm to pass.
Okay. And I think you started winding down about early September, late September?
Yeah, I would say instead of winding down, we transition.
Okay.
We get into our prescribed fire season. The prescribed fire season, it could be any time during the year, just depending on conditions, but ordinarily we're gearing up for that as the monsoons are tapering off. Again, to mimic conditions that when the forest used to burn naturally, it didn't burn or carry very far when it was heavy rain. So we tend to transition into our prescribed fire season in September. So that's about the time things are winding down. Also, coincidentally, it's winding down around the country for the most part. The Northern Rockies in some years, they'll have a fire season well into September, but ordinarily the rest of the country sort of mellows out in the fall.
Maybe you could talk just very briefly about two firefighting efforts, and one is to set up fire lanes, or I guess fire breaks is what you call them, and the other one is prescribed burns. The fact that you use those to kind of reduce some of the fuels and, and I guess actually make it a more healthy forest.
Absolutely. And I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this. And you and I have talked about this in other forums. I think the first thing I'd like to say is, especially here on the Prescott National Forest, a couple of years ago, we've made a conscious effort internally, and now we're trying to take the message externally. The primary reason we do that fuels work of either prescribed burns or creating fuels break or thinning out the woods, and I can speak to the mastication as well, where we use the giant chipper to grind the material. The real primary reason in the last few years is we're trying to be very deliberate. That's about firefighter safety. If we can reduce the risk and the exposure for where firefighters are likely to have to make a stand to protect something, that's why we want to do this, and I would say community protection is second. Not that that's never been there in the past, but I don't think we've been very deliberate or overt about that. We've always focused on, hey, it's about community protection, natural resource protection, and then protection of public lives. Certainly our firefighter lives come first, but we've never really carried that into our fuels reduction and hazardous fuels work. And so that's where I would start with this. But you're absolutely right. What that does, two reasons. One, you spoke to the protection values. We do that to reduce the fire behavior that might be coming in or out of town. But on the other hand, there's also a restorative effect to that. We know through science and research that there's a lot more growth over the last 100 years due to fire suppression. There's a lot more material in the woods than there was historically, to the point where the vegetation becomes unhealthy. We have elevated risk when there is a fire. So we do a lot of this work to restore the ecosystem back to its natural existence or historic existence.
Okay. Talking about fire safety, I was talking to Arizona Public Service, and they indicate that when there's a major fire and it gets close to their transmission lines, they actually shut down the line. So people need to understand sometimes when there is a fire and they don't have electricity for some reason, it's because it's for firefighter safety, because I guess the carbon moving through the atmosphere and getting in contact with a line will actually create lightning to the ground.
Yeah, it can discharge to the ground, absolutely, especially the heavier, the denser the smoke is, that can happen. So that is the primary reason, because of firefighter safety. We work very closely with APS, and they're often they're very low on, or very high on the list of folks we call right away if we know that there's power lines nearby, and that's the primary reason that they will shut the power down. But then we're also worried that should the fire burn, especially the wooden poles, just the power line coming down and onto the ground causes a hazard for anybody. So it's not just the arcing of a power line elevated, but if for some reason it burns down, that's often the case why we will ask them to turn it off if they haven't thought of it ahead of us.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you for all you do. It's really great. I think you got a great facility here and a lot of capabilities, and I think what we'll do now is go out and visit some of those capabilities and just see what you have to offer.
Great.
Okay. Thank you.
You bet. My pleasure.
Okay, we're now outside the fire center here at the airport, and I'm with Tony from engine 930. As a matter of fact, I think this is 930. Yeah. I believe you're stationed down at Fire Station 71 on the White Spar.
Yes.
And you co-locate with them. I think your primary responsibility is for the U.S. Force areas in town, around town, but maybe you could tell us how you use the truck, how many people you have that actually are part of the crew to go out and do whatever work you have to do.
Okay. Yeah, this is what we call a Type 3 engine. It's the largest engine that we have for the Forest Service. It carries 600 gallons of water. We have 7 folks that staff it. We're staffed 7 days a week throughout the summer. We are also a national resource, so when our fire season in the Southwest calms down, we get up to Montana and Idaho and other parts of the country, so we have that capability. Locally here, our primary response is initial attack for those fires that do start, either lightning or human caused. And we have a great cooperation with our agencies that we're located with, and that mutual aid response that we have. We can respond to the fires in city, and Groom Creek and Walker are areas that we respond to quite often.
How many of these trucks do you have in the local Prescott area?
So there's 2 Type 3 engines in the Prescott area. There's 1 Type 3 engine over on the Camp Verde, and then there's a Type 6 engine. His area is Crown King and Mayor, and then there's a Type 6 engine out of Station 54. So the Type 6 engine is a smaller engine. It carries 300 gallons of water, but primarily do the same job we do.
Okay. Is that smaller truck that I've seen?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Okay. You said this had a crew of 7. What's the crew on the other one?
The crews are the same. So the 7 people on the Type 6 is also.
Okay. So do you carry everybody in here, or they have auxiliary vehicles?
So if we're staffing 7 days a week, normally I'll only have 5 folks on. Okay. We can bring them on and staff with additional people during extreme fire danger, and then we do have a utility truck that they drive around in.
Okay. And a smaller truck can get to more remote areas in the forest where this one probably couldn't?
Yes, so this engine here, we get ourselves involved in a little bit more urban interface. We have a little bit more capabilities for pumping water, so we see a little bit more urban interface than, say, the Type 6 engines do. And they're a little bit more of those remote areas and smaller Forest Service roads, but we can drive this in quite a few places too.
Okay. So if you use all the water on this, where do you go to get refills?
So we have drafting capabilities. We don't have a lot of water around the Prescott area, but we do have lakes and stuff that we can draft from. We can also get some water from the hydrants in the towns and stuff, and then also water tenders. So we rely a lot on our cooperators for water tenders when we have fires. So.
Okay. And I think you do a lot of work out in the forest. I'm sure you take this with you when you do establish fire breaks and do prescribed burns. And maybe you can even talk about burning slash piles that are, I guess where you thin the forest and leave the material there to be burned on site. Mm-hmm.
So we're primarily a holding resource during these prescribed burns, and what that means is that we have control lines established, and we can put our hose lays in, so we have water capabilities right on the exterior of the fire. And when we're talking about slash pile burning, a lot of times we try to do that where there's enough moisture in the soil or snowpack that we don't really have that escape issue. But we are there just in case that we need to come in and put a control line in. So our control lines are usually down to mineral soil and 16 inches wide, but we obviously have water, so we can use that as a resource too.
So you said that sometimes you go to other states. Do you take this vehicle and drive there, or are you flown there in some kind of transport or what?
Yeah, we do a lot of driving. Once we kind of leave the forest and the Southwest area is in monsoons, we drive it all the way up to wherever we need to. So a few years back we were in northern Washington and near the Canadian border, and there's engines that are back east right now, back in Georgia and stuff. So yeah, we have that capability.
But you can also draw other assets in here if you need additional assets.
Absolutely, yeah. That's our fire manager's jobs, is to kind of get those resources established and get in, and that's currently what they're working on right now, is we'll be bringing in some folks from outside the area. So. Okay.
Well, thanks, Tony.
Absolutely.
Appreciate giving us this information, and thanks for everything you do.
Yeah, absolutely. No problem.
Okay, we're outside the Fire Center still, and I'm with Justin Haynes. And we're standing in front of a monument here, so I think we ought to have a little explanation of what this means to you here.
Well, this monument is of Henry Y.H. Kim. It's our aviation facility. Henry Y.H. Kim was a regional aviation officer who ended up dying in a fire flying an aircraft in New Mexico, and he was a naval aviator as well. Okay.
Is the facility named after him?
The facility is named after him, yes, sir.
Okay. Prevention is a major part of fire season, and I think there's a lot that the public can do. So maybe you give the public some idea just exactly what they can do to help your firefighting efforts and keep down the hazard.
Okay. Well, they can do several things to keep down the hazard. It's really critical that they kind of follow the FireWise steps, that they keep everything clear from their home around 30 feet, and then keep the brush and the ladder fuels down kind of, the 100-foot perimeter. We kind of call that area the home ignition zone. And then also, when they're trimming some of these, the brushes, make sure they aren't doing it in the hottest part of the day when they could actually cause a wildfire as well.
Okay. And I believe there's an organization in Prescott called POWIC. Maybe you can explain what that means and what they do and how the citizenry can utilize them.
The Prescott Area Wildland Urban Interface Commission, they actually they sponsor most of the Firewise communities and do a lot of other things in the community. They also have grants that homeowners can apply for, and even HOAs can apply for to help mitigate some of the brush, which you get rid of a lot of the brush and you get you get rid of the ladder fuels, and you're able to mitigate the brush, which mitigates the hazards. Well, when you have a wildland fire that comes through, it lays it down to the ground and makes it a lot easier for firefighters to contain it and fight that fire. And
I think there's also fire danger when people go out in the forest and they don't take care of the campfires correctly.
Yeah, that's true. 38% of the wildland fires that are unwanted and unintentional are caused by campfires on the Prescott National Forest.
And that's people either not watching the fire or leaving it unattended or things of that nature.
Our biggest issue is people leaving the fire unattended. They don't put it out when they leave and go home for the weekend usually. A lot of times, or they go for a couple-hour hike, or they go to the store while they're camping. The biggest thing they can do to put out their campfire, it takes about an average of 5 gallons of water to put out their campfires, and then make sure they stir it with a shovel and just make sure it's cold to the touch before they leave.
Okay. And I believe a lot of fires have started along the highways due to people pulling trailers.
Yeah, that's very true. A lot of our fires are started along the highways, people pulling trailers and or brakes getting hot, debris from vehicles, whether it's metal pieces off of vehicles, and then also parking into the grass. The biggest thing that they can do to help eliminate that is to make sure that their vehicle is in good condition and that they aren't parking on the tall grass. And this year is especially important because the grass area has a lot of fuel load because of the higher
winter moisture.
Yeah. And then a lot of our fires are started off kind of the I-17 area that Forest Service and a lot of BLM actually resources respond to.
Okay. And I believe POWIC has a meeting at I think it's like the first Wednesday or Thursday of each month.
Yes, sir. I believe it's every the Thursday of each month.
Yeah, first Thursday. And if anybody wants to, from the public wants to go in and talk about their situation or try and get more information on how they can prevent fires around their homes or even if they're out in the woods, POWIC, I think, is a very good asset. And they also have a website. I don't have it available right now, but we'll make sure we have it available sometime during the filming of this event.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Justin.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Appreciate it. We're now inside the fire center, what I would probably call the aircraft control area, where they control all the aircraft that support firefighting operations here. And I have Julie with me and Cindy, and I'd like to ask you some questions on basically aerial operations, tanker operations, things of that nature. I don't think you keep aircraft here all the time. I think you get them on contract primarily for the fire season. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mayor. So here at the Prescott Fire Center at the air tanker base, we do not have aircraft that stay here year-round, and so they come whenever there's a need. So, for example, right now we have 2 single-engine air tankers that are here, but they're not. They're here until there's a fire or a need to go somewhere else.
Okay. And what type of aircraft do you normally have come in during the fire season? I think you got helicopters, small aircraft. Some of them are observation, maybe control helicopters for a fire. And then, of course, you have the slurry bombers. Is that correct?
That's correct. So we have a variety of aircraft, as you mentioned. For air tankers, we have what we call large air tankers, which would carry several thousand gallons of retardant. And then we have single-engine air tankers, which would carry about 800 gallons of retardant. In addition to that, we have what we call air attack platforms, which would go over the fire and make observations on the fire behavior and control some of the aircraft that are coming in and out of the fire. We do have a variety of helicopters from large to small, and we also can see lead planes, which would guide the air tankers in and out of the fires.
Okay. And I think John Cox, the airport manager, told me that many of the aircraft that you have come in here have to come in on a waiver because I guess they're a little too heavy for our runway. Is that correct? And I think in the future you're going to be getting rid of some of the older model airplanes and going toward more jets. Is that going to be an issue in the future with this airport?
And that's a good question. I don't know if I can speak to all the details. Right now, all of the heavy air tankers that we have on federal contracts do operate under a waiver through the city of Prescott. We are going to be phasing out the P2Vs, the older style aircraft, and then our fleet will be composed of jet aircraft. And so right now, yes, we do have waivers for weight-bearing purposes
Okay.
for landing.
And I think with the jets, it might even be the length of the runway, is what I'm hearing. So one of the things I'm working on right now is to try and get funding to both strengthen and lengthen the runway at least another 1,500 feet and make it capable probably, for the C-130 to come in and be able to load up without being on a waiver. And I think you do get some C-130s both on civilian contract and I think sometimes if you need them, you can actually get them from the Air Force. Is that correct?
That is correct, yep.
Can you tell me how that works? Do they have I've been on a lot of C-130s and, I never see anything inside, so they must have some kind of a kit or something that they can put in that actually loads up the slurry and then they go out and how do they drop it? Is it air pressure, compressed air or something?
It is, it's compressed air and they have an internal tank that we fill up the retardant into the internal tank and then, it comes out of a penal tube and it's out of the compressed air that they could also, when they're flying, compress air themselves, or we can put the compressed air from the ground in.
Okay. Sometimes I was at the fire center up in Idaho,
Okay.
Boise. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And as I understand it, they actually have smoke jumpers. Now, we don't do smoke jumping here that I'm aware of. If we insert anybody, it's probably through helicopters. If we want to put a team on the ground, they would actually be landed by helicopter or drive into the fire.
Typically, yeah, we can have some smoke jumpers come down from different regions, but our regions doesn't have any smoke jumpers that I'm aware of.
Actually, in Silver City,
that's true.
New Mexico, which is considered our region, they do have smoke jumpers that come down. So historically on the Prescott National Forest, we don't
Okay.
generally use them.
But you do sometimes insert by a helicopter into remote areas?
Sure.
Yeah. And I know when I was up there, I was talking about the number of injuries they have from people that jump in on fires, and they do have a fair number of injuries. So I think if we can air land them, that's probably the best. Now, I know recently you made an improvement out here to the number of loading pads you have. I think that's a significant improvement. What's the turnaround time on when a plane comes in and needs to reload, that you can actually get it reloaded and it's able to go back out again?
So it kind of depends on the tank size. Our pumps load between 400 and 450 gallons per minute, and a large air tanker would hold anywhere from 2,000 to 4,000 gallons of retardant. So you can do some math. And we can generally get planes in and out of the pits, the loading pits, within 6 or so minutes, or at least the load on board. And then, of course, they need to go through checklists and things to start the aircraft before they can taxi out. So I would say from when they get into the pit until they have retardant and have completed all the things that they need to do, 15 minutes or so.
Okay. Do you have the ability to refuel the planes here, or do they have to go someplace else on the airfield to get fuel if you're on extended missions?
We work extensively with Legend Aviation, our FBO, and they'll come down with their fuel trucks and fuel here. On occasion, if we have numerous aircraft, we don't like to fuel in the pit because that blocks the pit and doesn't allow us to load fire retardant. So then we'll work with our our airport manager and their operations team to find other locations across the airfield to fuel.
Okay. And I think the slurry is basically a mix of dry chemicals and water. Is that correct?
That's correct. So it has salts, phosphate. There's a iron oxide, which will color the retardant and make it that red that you see. There's a gum thickener as well, which basically thickens it and allows the retardant to stick to the vegetation. And it comes in concentrated form, so we get it from Buckeye, Arizona. It comes up in tanker trucks. We load it into the tanks that are just out the back here in concentrated form. And then it's mixed with water, 1 part of the concentrated retardant to 5.5 parts of water, mixes on demand, goes underneath the ground and then into the aircraft.
Okay. Well, it sounds like a very interesting operation, and maybe when we have the fire scene going here and you got more planes in here, I'd like to come out and just watch you in operation, because I think this is a very interesting aspect that, many people don't realize we have this capability here. You're kind of tucked away on the airport, and, I have a lot of people always ask me, what do we have here to fight fires? I see the planes coming over, where do they come from? Do they operate out of our airport, or do they operate elsewhere? And I think most of the planes that you get on contract can actually come in here. I think it's only the DC-10 that actually has to go to, I think, Gateway to load up. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you very much, and appreciate this time with you, and we'll be moving on to the Operations Center if we can get in there, because I think they got a fire going, and we might have to do something else. But anyway, thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Prescott is back to my home.
Okay, we're now in the dispatch center at the Prescott Fire Center, and I'm speaking with Barry, who I guess manages and pretty much runs this operation. And looks like a very interesting place. You got a lot of monitors up and a lot of information on it. Maybe you can kind of explain what you do here and how you control firefighting efforts.
Sure, yeah. So here at the Prescott Dispatch Center, we're responsible for dispatching resources primarily to wildland fires here on the Prescott National Forest, and then also across a good portion of central and western Arizona. We dispatch for the Bureau of Land Management, Bureau of Indian Affairs, and also the Fish and Wildlife Service. So pretty much anywhere in western Arizona, if it's on federal land, we'd be responsible for dispatching resources to initial attack on a wildland fire. And then if that initial attack then turns into extended attack and the fire's still going that second and third day, then we kind of turn into more of a logistical support function to get those resources what they need to fight that fire.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And you got a lot of information up here on the boards.
Sure.
Can you tell me some of the information that you're seeing here and how it benefits the people out there fighting the fire?
You bet, yeah. So we've kind of gone with this concept of turning the walls into usable information for us. So we've got a lot of monitors around the room, large screen projector. So just some examples behind us. You can see a red flag warning just popped up in northwest Arizona, and so we'll get that information and we'll send it out via kind of a mass text notification system to all the resources in that area, and then also broadcast that information on the radio. Another example would be display here of, it's called automated flight following. So all of our contract aviation resources are in this system. They have some hardware on an air tanker or a helicopter, and essentially that tracks that resources almost in real time. We can see the position, location, and status of aircraft as they're responding to fires. We've got situation reports, weather feeds. We'll have the local news media outlets on there. A lot of times we get some great footage and information straight from the news media and the helicopters they put up, and that footage provides some really good awareness for us as well. So yeah, a lot of information up on the screens here. And then in terms of the physical layout, we've got 9 workstations out here on the floor, and each one is set up with multiple monitors to track the different systems we're responsible for. And then the radio system, which is kind of at the foundation of what we do, is staying in touch with resources, making sure they're tracked and accounted for, and safely get back home at night. So yeah, it's a nice setup here, and they've given us a real nice workspace. Each one of these workstations will raise and lower so you can stand up while you work, get off your feet, and yeah, real good setup.
How many
here.
agencies work out of this dispatch center?
So in terms of funded positions here in the dispatch center, 3 of the agencies fund positions. So the Forest Service, the BLM, and then the Bureau of Indian Affairs staff positions here in the office. The Fish and Wildlife we also support, and they provide funding for the center on an annual basis. So essentially 4 federal land management agencies we dispatch for out of this office.
But you also work with Arizona Forestry, even though they're not here.
Absolutely, yeah. So our dispatch center, like I said, covers a good part of western Arizona, and certainly mixed right in that dispatch area is state and private land that the state forestry is responsible for. So absolutely, on every incident, we're coordinating with state forestry. You know, there's hardly an incident that doesn't affect both the federal agencies and the state. So constant communication, coordination with aircraft, ground resources, and they provide a lot of capability for us as well with the fire departments. So the state contracts with the fire departments, and that gives us, you know, a lot of times fire departments are going to be on scene of an incident well before the federal agencies are, especially out in western Arizona where it's so, you know, kind of vast. So we rely heavily on the fire departments and their capability to respond during initial attack. So
And these are fire departments from cities and towns.
correct, yeah, districts, departments, volunteer departments. So yeah, that coordination and partnership really is critical to what we do. And you know, bringing it closer to home, certainly here in the Prescott area. And for the Prescott National Forest, both the Verde Valley Fire Department cooperators, and then certainly here around the Prescott Basin, the cooperators here, the relationships we've built over the years, and those partnerships are invaluable and really strong right now. We feel like we're really in a good place.
So are you operating here 24 hours a day in this dispatch center?
We are currently, yeah. Normally throughout the year, we're just a daytime operation. But right now, kind of in the core of the fire season, we go ahead and bring in that night shift component. A lot of our activity has been coming in at night here recently. We've been dealing with a lot of fires along I-17, Highway 93 out in western Arizona. And something about those fires, they seem to come in the evening or right in the middle of the night. So, yep, we've got that night shift going.
So how do people report fires to you? Does that come through the county or
Yeah,
through the sheriff's department or?
Yeah, any number of sources really. You know, if somebody calls 911, we'll probably get a report passed to us from the 911 center, the county, Department of Public Safety. We get a lot of reports along the roadways through DPS. Citizen reports, you know, our phone number is pretty widely advertised out there, so a lot of times we'll get a call direct from somebody seeing smoke. And then we have 4 lookout towers here on the forest as well that call in smoke reports.
Well, you got a lot of responsibility here, but it looks like you got a lot of ways to manage the information and make sure you dispatch the right resources to the fires.
Yes,
So,
sir.
good talking to you,
Yeah,
Harry,
you as well.
and,
Pleasure.
We'll probably have to do this again next year because we always got new people moving
You
into
got it.
town. They want
Hey,
to know
come see us
what's
anytime.
out here to fight fires. So,
Sounds great.
Thank
Thank you.
we're now inside what's called the cache here at the fire center, and looks like a giant warehouse to me. Has a lot of stock in here. Maybe you could tell us the purpose of this cache, how many of them there are in the United States, what kind of material you have here, and what's the primary purpose of it?
Sure, Mayor. Well, this is the Prescott Fire Cache. We are one of 15 national caches that serves the wildland firefighting system. We have approximately 820 line items, possibly worth about $7 million. We service our main purpose is to service the forest fighters and firefighters here in the state of Arizona, minus a small pocket which is carved out south of Tucson, which our sister unit here in the Southwest, the Silver City Cache, manages. We also have the ability, when necessary, to ship our products or our supplies to any other cache in the country when they're in their heavy fire season. But right now, April, May, and June is our season, so we're kind of first in the year, so other caches are supporting us at the moment.
Okay. And what kind of material you have here? I see some, it looks like coolers over there, so I guess if guys are out on the line, they can have something cool to drink or something. And
Well,
looks like I was in here, saw a lot of hoses of various types and earmuffs, ear protection.
Well, the short of it is we have everything that the firefighter and the support staff would need to run what they call a base camp in support of wildfire fighting operations. That includes right behind us hand tools, like you also noticed, fire hose. We also have various other types of water handling equipment. We also provide shelters that they can use as temporary offices.
Tents?
Tents, yeah, it's more of it's a large tent, yes.
Okay.
And that's basically because we never know where we're going to go, where they're going to set base camp up. They can set up in a hardened building like a school, or they could wind up in a fairground or field, and they would need some kind of shelter to work in. We also have tables and chairs so that they can work off of. We also have clothing items, so we outfit the firefighter from head to toe. Helmets, shirts, jeans. The only thing we don't do is boots. We also have MREs so that they, just in case they get to the field before a caterer can be set up, they can still have something to eat on while they're out in the field.
Well, I'm military, so I know what MREs are. Why don't you make
Yes.
sure we know, let everybody else know what that
They're a
is.
little bit, yes, I'm sorry. They are a little bit better than probably what you remember,
Yes.
but they are still a dry, good meal that's compressed and stored for a long time.
Yeah. And they can heat them, and I know they have a lot of calories. And,
Yes.
somebody fighting a fire is probably going to be using a lot of calories. And
Yeah,
needs the energy.
if you haven't had a hot meal and you're looking for something to eat, the meals ready to eat will serve its purpose.
So if people had to stay in an area for 2 or 3 days, do you have cots and sleeping bags?
Exactly. We have cots, sleeping bags. We also have pumps, tents, tanks that they could draw water from and use as a water source. We also have saws, generators, just anything that the firefighter could need. We also make kits, first aid kits, and office kits, so that again, people that are not everybody that goes out to a camp and fights a fire or supports a fire is a firefighter. They have some of our own people who are not firefighters go out and support the mission by just doing their regular jobs, such as finance or personnel or human resources. So we have a variety of people that are located in the camp.
Okay. How many people do you have working with you right here in the cache?
Our full-time staff is 8. That's full-time and a couple of seasonals. But in the event that a fire does break out and we need to bring more staff on, we can bring up to 30 emergency hires, and they would help us pull from the stock, create the order, locate it, pack it, and like I said, we have drivers that would take it from here to wherever we need to go. As far as either border or the state, east or west, north, and as far south as Yuma.
Now, I see some vans out there, so I guess they could be packaged in vans, and you got a tractor would pull a van to where we need to go.
Yeah, one of the more supportive things we do is we create what we call a cash van. Basically, we get together with the teams that are out in the field, and they make a list of the things that they would like to have on a day's notice. We pre-package that, and we have 7 or 8 of those pre-positioned around the state so that we could make sure that they get those items as quick as possible. The only thing we need to do is get that trailer to the incident where it's located.
So let's say you issue out for a fire. Do you get a lot of that stuff back? Can you take it back? I'm sure something like a chainsaw generator probably just needs to be serviced and put away, and it could be used again. But other things you probably don't get back or don't want to get back. And I think you probably have to clean a lot of stuff.
Yeah, a lot of the stuff that you see here in the cache are consumable, but then we have a good portion of that which is durable, like you said, the generators, the chainsaws. Mainly after an item goes to an incident, We bring it back, we check it for its condition. If it's no good, then we make it unserviceable and we get rid of it. But if it's determined that it can be reused, we send it through a exhaustive process to make sure that it's clean, make sure it's serviceable, and then we put it back on the shelf for the next issue. In the last fire season, we did over 5,600, we call them returns, and over 5,500 of those were serviceable. So basically, we were able to take it off the truck, run it back through the system, and put it right back on the shelf for the next issue. And I want to say that we're all told was about $4.5 million worth of returns that were serviceable. So yes, we are able to take something that is then issued and then reuse it so that we are making good use of the taxpayer dollar.
So the things that are expendable or unserviceable, you're able to reorder those very quickly?
Yes, yeah. We have our parent unit is through DLA, Defense Logistics Agency, and we are able to call on them at a moment's notice to restock our shelves as necessary. We are also able to, like I was saying before, pull from other caches that the other 14 caches in the system so that they can also help us to restock our shelves again because they are not in the midst of their seasons. Yeah. So they are able to help us, and again, that's an efficient use of the money that is already spent for the products that we use.
It looks like you got enough redundant stockage here that you probably never run out. You always have something for the next fire, even though you're waiting for something to come in. Yeah, we do our best to make sure that we don't run out of anything because we just want to make sure that if and when it's needed, we don't want to have to say we don't have it. So we want to make sure that whatever the field needs, the field gets. In the event that we do run out of something, like I said, we are able to take advantage of our sister caches and process an order to DLA to make sure that they get here usually in a 24 to 48 hour period if necessary. But we do our best to make sure that we don't run out of anything. Okay. Well, you got a great facility here. You got a lot of stock, and maybe we can get a little footage of some of the stuff that you got here because people don't realize this is here. Sure. You know, I talk to people, they don't even know this fire center exists. And the fact that you have this kind of capability here, I think can be very reassuring for the public. Shauna, we appreciate it. Sure. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Now we're out on the flight line next to the fire center, and I have Brian with me, and maybe Brian, you can tell me what your responsibilities are here with the center, and also maybe what this type of aircraft is behind us and how you use it.
Sure. So I'm here as a visitor from Region 5, and I've been brought in as an Air Tactical Group Supervisor, and we bring this plane here. It's contracted with the Forest Service, and this is an air attack plane, and together myself and the pilot go out, and our responsibilities out on the fire are to supervise all the aircraft that are responding to the fire, separate them vertically and horizontally, and direct retardant and bucket drops from helicopters, and work with the folks on the ground to support those firefighters in their mission on the fire.
So you have radio contact with other aircraft and people on the ground?
Absolutely.
As well as the dispatch center back here?
Absolutely. We take off out of here. We make initial contact with the dispatch center to let them know where we're going, when we expect to be there. And then we have assigned frequencies that we're communicating with the other aircraft on, and then also with the folks on the ground on another frequency. So we have the ability to monitor up to 12 frequencies. We have 6 different radios of two types.
So this aircraft is on contract? This is not something that belongs to the U.S. Air
Force
Service?
Yeah, it's contracted with the U.S. Forest Service for 120 days. Its actual host base is in California, but we activated early during the fire season here in Arizona to come down and help these guys out.
Have you been out on some fires recently?
I haven't, but this plane has. Much like every other position, you can only work so many days before you need some time off, so I've just rotated and taken the spot of another Air Tactical Group Supervisor. Okay.
So you're here for how many days?
It'll be 15 days total.
15 days?
Yeah.
So you're ready to go up at anytime there's a fire?
That's correct, yeah.
For those 15 days?
Yeah.
Okay. And then what happens? You go back to the Region 5 or whatever it was you said?
Yeah, we'll go back to Region 5, California, myself, and someone else will take my spot until this period has expired here, which is roughly the middle of June, and then there's negotiations. If it's needed here, it can stay here, and we're here to provide a service, and wherever they need us, we'll go.
Well, it sounds like a very interesting mission. I know when I was in the service, I had to control air operations with jets and helicopters and people on the ground. And it'd be very demanding, and I know that a lot of times it can be confusing too, and you're trying to keep everything separated in proper distances, and so do you work with the pilot on that, or does he pretty much just fly the plane and you're in charge of the operation, or what?
Yeah, I mean, but there's we're a crew and we can help each other out. So if I'm busy or getting overloaded on the radio, the pilot can certainly answer on a separate frequency and speak to another aircraft, answer the call and take a message, so to speak, for myself, and then I can get back to him. And it can get demanding, and that's why we all work together. Just because I'm in charge of separating the airspace, the other pilots and the other aircraft, they're all professionals as well, and we help each other out in that regard and try to help make each other's life easier.
What's the endurance time on this aircraft so you can stay on station?
We're expected to do about a 4-hour leg. That includes getting to the fire and then to landing about 4 hours. We have enough fuel to do a little more than that, just as an extra margin of safety, a little safety buffer. And on a busy going fire, 4 hours, that's a long time to be doing that, and it can go by real quick when you are doing it, but you can feel pretty beat up afterwards.
So then do you do a turnaround for another 4, or does somebody else would come in?
Yeah, we would request a relief air attack, and we would have what's called a transition over the fire, where I would brief that incoming air attack on what's going on, the tactics, the aircraft that are there, and how to proceed. And then once that individual was comfortable, I would depart, and we may agree upon then a time where I would come back to relieve them based on their fuel capacity.
Well, Brian, it sounds like a very demanding job and one with a lot of responsibility, and it looks like you got a nice plane to fly in, so we appreciate everything you're doing for us.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.
Yeah. Okay, we're out on the airfield still, on the flight line, outside the Prescott Fire Center, and I have Steve with me. He's a pilot on this aircraft behind us, which is able to drop slurry. It looks to me like it's an old crop duster. I don't know whether it is, but maybe you can just explain a little bit about the plane and how much slurry you can carry and how you deliver your slurry.
Okay, it certainly can be a crop duster, and it is. It has been a crop duster, but it's been specially modified and adapted to the fire world, and we can carry 800 gallons of retardant. Delivery system is through an online gate behind me, and we can adjust different levels for coverage or different methods of delivery. And we work with Air Attack to determine the proper coverage for the right moment.
Okay. And I was just up in the Air Center, and they talked about their ability to load at about, I think, 300 to 400 gallons a minute. So your turnaround time is probably pretty fast on this aircraft.
It can be. At a base like this with those kind of pumps, it can be a pretty good turnaround. We don't stop. We come in and we hot load retardant, and we turn around real quick. And I would say between 2 to 4 minutes, maybe 5 minutes, depending on the base we're at. But the turnaround time is quick.
Yeah.
It is quick.
Now, you're on contract. I think these planes are on contract.
That's correct.
With the U.S. Forest Service. You're out of Phoenix.
Out of Phoenix, yes.
And so basically, you contract with some company and come in and provide the pilot services.
Yes, I believe we're on a Department of Interior contract now, okay. And we're a private vendor based in the Buckeye, Arizona area, Goodyear and Buckeye.
Okay.
But we travel throughout the western U.S. Predominantly for the season.
Okay. And I think you got here, about late April, early May? How long have you been here, and how long will you stay here?
Okay, we're on call. We came here the 15th of May, and we could be here one more day or an entire summer. That we do not know or have knowledge of. It depends on where the resources are most utilized or needed. So we're not sure how long.
Okay. Since you've been here, have you been out on any slurry missions?
Not yet, no.
Not yet?
No.
Because I know that they can ask for you to go other places, even outside our district.
That's absolutely true, and but we maintain a readiness to be to go at any time we get the call. We do maintain a readiness and stay prepared to go at any given moment.
Well, we really appreciate this asset being here and appreciate you being here.
My pleasure.
Provide us fire support if we need it.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Okay, we're back inside the fire center and out of that 15-knot wind that we were fighting with out there, trying to give you an understanding of operations on the flight line. I hope this tour has been an opportunity for you to understand the tremendous asset we have out here with the U.S. Forest Service to protect us in this local area from wildfires. And of course, we have the Prescott Hot Shots here. It's about 20 people that normally come in early May time frame, and we'll stay here until we're well into the monsoon season, and it looks like we're going to have less opportunity for wildfires. So I really appreciate everybody out here that was so willing to share their time. Pete Gordon, Jeff Andrews, and everybody else. I really appreciate them giving us the opportunity to inform you of this facility out here, and that we have a great asset that can protect us from wildfires and Prescott. Thank you, and I'll see you next month.